Hello, I'm George from Pavliscak Studios. I'm going to be making a glass marble today out of Moretti glass rods on a propane oxygen torch. I just changed over my oxygen tank about 15 minutes ago, and so I'm going to readjust my pressure because sometimes the pressure creeps up when the high side pressure is very high. So I've bled my lines and readjusted my low side gauge, which well, sometimes if the oxygen pressure gets too high, then it will your propane pressure will not be enough and your flame will be cold and blowing itself out. All right, so today that marble I'm going to make is going to be a swirl marble. We're going to put it on a clear core. We're going to decorate the core with some enamel powder, which is heavily colored glass powder. And then on top of that glass powder, we are going to put one other color of powder over that first color, but just a little bit so you can see the back color through the foreground color. It'll give it a little texture, a little depth. And then on top of that, we're going to put some panels of frit, and then we're going to case it. And we'll use, rather than a furnace dipping method, we're going to use a rod swiping method. So I was in production mode earlier today, so I've got glass rods everywhere. I'm going to take a few seconds just to put away some of the many rods that I have on my bench top. If you have too many rods on your bench top and you go to set something down, one rod can stick to the other, or your rod can roll away or underneath a bunch of other rods which are rolling around, and it leads to the possibility of accidents and burns. So I'm just tidying up a little bit, and the rods that I'm going to use is a recycled blue rod that I pull from all of my mistakes, which I dump several times a year into a crucible and then melt in an electric furnace and pull it out into rods. And it's slightly bubbly and sparkly and usually light blue. It's a little bit stiffer because some of the fluxing agents have been burned out, but it's great for cores, especially if I'm covering stuff over with enamel powder and not twisting it a lot. That's okay. If I was making a marble that had a lot of twist in it, or twist on multiple axes, I wouldn't want to use such a stiff recycled glass. But this is okay for this. It's something I always also use it for beads and just glass handles or punty rods. So I'm going to grab one more of my clear punties and one more of my recycled punties, and I'll be back in a second. So just rods that I pull out of the crucible furnace. If I'm ever pulling color 2, I pull rods of varying diameters like that to then work on my torch throughout the year. So let's fire it up. I have a spark lighter. I'll light the propane, light the oxygen. I'm going to turn on my ventilation fan. Adjust my flame. And in the pre-show, you saw some of the enamel powders. Here's the brown enamel powder, which will be our base. I'm going to do an accent panel of orange, and then I'm going to use some transparent yellow frit and some aventurine copper dust frit. And I'm going to adjust my very hastily set up area here. And that looks better. Alright, let's do it that way. Alright, so we're going to get a core, and there's a couple different ways to do it. The way I'm going to do it today is I'm going to heat the ends of these clear rods and start pushing them together. As they melt together, I'm going to angle them and straighten them, and that's going to build a gather between the two. Let's see how that is done. I'm just going to give them a quick flash here to get their temperature up, because like some of this rod end is bigger. Once they start melting, I'll smush them together. You can see it's getting hot, turning orange. Two. They'll both get a little bit more orange on them. I'm going to put them together. Now, as they're at an angle and I'm turning them, oops, I broke that. They're rolling onto each other. And when I roll them onto each other, rather than just pushing them together or bundling a bunch together and melting them together, I'm twisting it so I'm not trapping a lot of air in between where those two rods come together. And then I can straighten it out and adjust the heat. And there you can see the gather starting to grow already. And it's free of bubbles, except for the bubbles that were already in that rod. And so since this is going to be covered up with a layer of enamel powder, and you won't see this core, this is a great opportunity to reuse some of our less desirable glass. When you're working on a furnace, you want all of the glass in your furnace to be super high quality. When you're at the torch, it's okay to extend your color by just coating something else in that color that you want. Because some of these colors, like bright yellows and pinks and reds, may cost 5 times as much as your regular rods per pound. So you can stretch those colors out by pulling them into threads or covering a plain color like white or clear with the color that you like. If you're going to pull it and rarefy it, then there might be instances where you want an opaque base, in which case you'd use white or black, or any other color, really. The basics are a good place to start. As far as clear and white and black, that's not so much colors, so that any color you do use is going to stand out. So I broke my other little recycled rod. So grabbing another one, dropping stuff today. That's pretty fun. And I'm going to get a little bit more. So this gather's kind of getting big. I'm just shooting for when it's a cylinder that I'm going to start shaping to cover with the enamel powder. I would like it to be about 1 inch long and 1/2 inch in diameter. And that's your choice. This is about the right size, and the shape is funky, but I'm going to fix it once I have a mass of glass there. So I've got 2 attachment points right now. Both are glass. I'm going to melt off the shorter one. Arbitrary, doesn't really matter which one you melt off first. I'm going to start to shape this into a cylinder. The cylinder, once I have my shape ready to start putting in enamel powder, I'm going to roll it as a cylinder in the enamel powder to cover it evenly. Then I'm going to shape it into a squarish tube so that each flat side will pick up what is known as a panel. This will be a 4-panel swirl. And each panel is one of the flat sides of that cylinder. So now this glass is hot, I'm going to use my graphite marver, which is right next to me, and my hand marver or paddle. I'm going to roll this into a cylinder and flatten the end. We did it. There is the cylinder, flattish, and now I'm going to switch my handle from a glass one here to a steel one on this free side. Then I'm going to fix the shape on this end. And I'll be ready to put my enamel powder on. Enamel powder is basically finely ground glass dust. That glass dust has a lot of opaquing and coloring agent in it, so it should cover in pretty quickly in a few layers, a few very thin layers. So the first layer you put on there, you'll be able to see through it, and light will come through. What you'll essentially have is you'll have a layer, you'll have the clear glass of the core, and another layer on the far side. So once you have one or two layers, and 2 or 3 layers on the cylinder, you won't be able to see through it. And really, it's my decision at this point if I want it to be more ghostly so you can see through it, or more opaque. And I guess now that I'm thinking about it, both are nice. Sometimes I like to see it pretty opaque in the middle, and then at the poles where it twists into nothingness, if you hold it up to a light, you can look all the way through it. That sort of harkens back to an old style German hand-blown marble technique. Pretty esoteric as far as people who like to collect glass. People who like to collect glass, there's a very small sliver of people who just collect marbles. And of those people who just collect marbles, there's a small sliver of people who collect antique German handmade marbles, which was a production glass blowing toy that was imported into the United States in the late 1880s through the 19-teens. Alright, so I've got a nice cylinder. It looks pretty hot. See how orange it is? Both ends are flat, pretty symmetrical. I'm going to start picking up my brown enamel. So it's hot. I'm going to roll it through the powder. And I'll show you that. It's a little bit far away. That's what it looks like when I first rolled it through. And I rolled it around, so there may be, that surface might have hit different areas of the powder like 5 to 7 times. And I got good coverage. Once you start melting it in, you can really see if you have good coverage or not. And if you look at that, you can't see through it. It's got a really nice ripply texture to it. It's not glass smooth. Anyway, I like that. I melted it into the surface, so now I'm going to just shape this cylinder into my 4-panel squarish tube. And there we've done it. Squarish tube, 4 panels. So my first panel, I'm going to pick up a light coating of orange enamel powder. Oh, in fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to have 2 panels of orange enamel. But it's just going to be light, a light coating. And since orange and brown are very similar colors, we are not going to be able to see the difference between those two until this reaches room temperature after it's done annealing. So now I'm going to have to see, okay, see which ones are which. So on the open brown panel, I'm going to put some aventurine, which is the copper frit. And there, I've added brown with the copper front. Let's just melt it a little bit into the surface so it's not popping off as I go. Now, on the ones where I put a little layer of orange, one of those panels I'm going to pick up that transparent yellow. There it is. Frame. That'll be very subtle. The other panel of orange I'm going to leave plain. I want that to show through on contrast. Now I'm just going to melt them in, and I'm going to reshape this square cylinder, square tube, to a regular cylinder. Then I'm going to start swipe coating it with a large diameter clear rod. The frit is bumpy. Let's look at it. If I try to swipe and encase that, I could. There are several ways of encasing that without bubbles. It involves a very hot gather and it's a little bit of jiggling. I'm going to melt those bumpy areas into the surface a little bit more, and past that to the point where I can reshape the cylinder into a tube. I'm not blazing away at it. The difference between torch work and glass blowing is that I can change the heat on this whole object relatively quickly, as opposed to glass blowing, which is a little bit slower, generally larger volumes. So, you know, like a race car, a lot of times you are not using all of the gas pedal. Sometimes you do, but most of the time you're being gentle. It's like you're delivering a pizza. You got a fast car, but how gently can you drive that car so you don't jostle the pizza before it gets to your customer? Can you guess what my first job was? No. Yes. No one was answering me. I was just messing with you. Alright, so we've made a cylinder. We've covered it with enamel powder. We shaped it into a squarish tube cylinder so we could make 4 panels, which we then decorated with various frits. Now we're going to case it. We're going to use a large diameter clear rod. We'll swipe. Once we get a hot bead on the end of this rod, we'll swipe back and forth, pushing it so that we're not trapping air between the swipes. So this would be what I've always called an enamel marble. I guess it would be just called a generic swirl. I think a lot of people who make marbles ever used enamel powder. I became interested in it watching larger scale glass blowing, and I really liked the way it made the designs look softer. So I thought, oh, here's a way I could stand out from other marble makers by using this enamel powder. And so I played with it with beads and such. There's my first swipe gather over the enamel and frit. And so even though this is not one of the kinds of marbles I make a lot of over the torch, I still occasionally do. I love putting in a lot of the aventurine. I think it's got just a gorgeous look with the enamel powder. When I have my crucible furnace running and making marbles a little bit faster, and can encase this enamel powder quickly in one go, it's a lot more convenient, and so I prefer that to doing it this way. The enamel powder is touchy. You don't want to have the enamel too hot, so that it moves when you encase it. And you want your droplet or bead on the end of your gather to be hot enough to swipe, but not so hot that it's pulling the design off of your enamel powder. So, a little balancing act in heat control. Always good, always fun. That is why we are here, making stuff on a glass, because it's just so amazing to work with, and there's so many things you can do with it. And even when you do something that you think, oh man, that was not the way I wanted, it comes out cool. You're like, oh, but I had the accident. And it might influence like all the things you do for years to come, just because you made what you thought at the time was a mistake. And it ended up being interesting or fascinating or a nice departure or twist from what you would normally do. It's like when I'm making earrings, I have a tendency to make earrings a certain way, and I'm like, oh, these are beautiful earrings, everyone's going to buy these, and no one even looks at them. And then you're like, oh man, these earrings are ugly, no one's ever going to want these earrings. And then it's like you sell 3 out of your batch of those ugly, what you thought were those ugly earrings at the market that day. I'm like, shit, what was I thinking? What do I know? Nothing. So it's not always up to the person who makes it to feel that it's the most beautiful thing that they've ever made. Just keep on making it, I guess. I'm always a fan of the process, so once I've made it, I'm like, well, let's send this on its way. There's really very few marbles that I keep for myself that I think, oh, this is one I want to retain because I really learned something here, or I want to come back to this, or this was a fantastic color combination that normally I wouldn't go to, but I really want to explore more. Okay, I lied. There's a lot that I would love to keep. Well, now I could just take pictures of it. But I do have a display up in my studio of just things that I think are cool that I want to go back to. And so a lot of times when I'm thinking about making marbles for the day, I may have like production stuff, like I want to make just Monster Eyes that day. But the last marble of the day is going to be something little and fun and cool just for me, or just to explore a new thing, or I'm going to take what I did all day and wreck one, but maybe I'll wreck it and it'll be cool. I don't know. Alright, so as I've been yapping away here, I got all the gathers swiped on there and no lines of air bubbles in between them, because what I was doing is I'd gather, take the hot gather and swipe one way, and then I would heat it so that instead of having a sharp union between the clear glass I just put on there and the enamel covered surface, I would heat it a little bit so it softened that edge, and then I would take my next gather in the opposite way, heat it, touch it to the surface, and then swipe it, pushing it along that little valley so that no air would get trapped in there. And it's fun. So now what I want to do is I'm going to clean up the ends of the cylinder. So it's basically open at the end. I really haven't covered it with, let's see, can we look all the way through? Yep, see the blue? So I haven't covered it with enamel powder, but I've covered over the enamel powder with the clear, because you don't want to overheat the enamel powder. It tends to fuzz up and devitrify the glass and make everything terrible. Ugh. So here I'm going to take that clear and I'm going to wrap it around the edge by heating it. I'm heating the whole piece of glass right now too, and including the metal handle because I don't want it to crack. The stainless steel putty wrap. Now I'm going to heat this free open end very strongly and bend those clear gathers over the flat end of this cylinder. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. I'll poke at it a little bit, and then I chill my tweezers. I like to use tweezers because they have a bunch of different interesting surfaces, you know, even a flat spot if I wanted to hit it. But very often I'll see like a bubble, and so I'll want to get in there and pull it out. And now here I've folded that clear glass over that edge to completely cover the enamel powder. And now I want to pinch that end closed. And so I'm going to use my glass blowing jacks, which in this case is going to be scissors, because they're the right scale. These barber shears are nice because they meet and they're thin, and so I can define a line here as I'm squeezing this, and then as I turn it and pinch it, I'm drawing that glass down to a little point, and then I can just chill that point with the scissors farther down and pop it off. Now, it's scissors were hot. So now the end, let's get it over there, it's not closed up. And that's okay. Let's switch to the other side. So I'm going to get a new stainless steel punty. And attach it in that end. It's a little sloppy. I'm going to go back and clean it up again. I'm going to take this end that's been attached for a while and really heat that stainless steel till it pulls out of the glass. And then I'm going to heat that open end like I had on the other side. Let's look at it in the open and messy. I'm going to heat that clear layer that I put on there. And I'm going to fold those clear layers over the end. So I've closed it a little bit. Let's look over here. I'm going to poke it closed a little bit more, see if I can close that window of the opaque enamel powder over that clear core. Just going to pull a little bit off there. Pull it to a point. And I'm going to get in there with my jacks or scissors. And the first thing I'll do is I'll define a line where I want the glass to separate, and then I'm going to start pinching it closed a little bit more, and then when I have it the shape I want it, I'll move back farther on the jacks where the metal is cold in comparison, and then pop that little bit off. I chilled it and cracked it, or froze the glass. Now my design is cased. 4 panels of different colored frit and enamel powder. Now I'm going to heat it up. The whole thing. I'm going to attach another handle, stainless steel punty rod. Punty is bridge, Italian. The handle connecting my hand to the glass. Attached. Now when the marble gets hot enough, I'm going to start imparting a twist, a little bit at a time. As I twist it, I'm going to collapse the cylinder into more of a sphere. So the amount of spin that you put in a marble is up to you. If you just heated it as fast as you could and started spinning it, you'd just be spinning the ends where the metal punty is attached to the glass. I want to spin it evenly throughout the whole gather of glass, the whole nascent marble. So I need to get more heat into the middle of the marble and start putting in some twist. And you can see, let's do it just there. You can see it's twisting already. That frit on enamel kind of looks like frog or toad skin. And believe it or not, I've actually got all the twist I want in that already. So now I want to take my messier end, this one, the one that didn't quite close up, I just reversed it. I'm going to melt off this steel handle, this one that I'm already wiggling. It's hot enough that it wants to release from the glass. I pull it out, and I'm pulling out just a little bit of glass with it so that I'm not leaving any metal particles behind. In this case, because I'm going to clean up this end and take a little bit more glass off, that really wouldn't have been an issue. It's more my sort of housekeeping as I was talking, I wasn't paying attention. I turned up my heat a little bit. And that was too much. Alright. Now I'm going to clean up this end just a little bit more. Let's get our line in there, perpendicular to the axis of rotation of this handle. We'll pinch it down, give it a little bit more twist on the end, and pop that little bubble off, and then we'll look at our end. Let's get it hot so you guys can see it. There's the end, a nice spiral. So now, what I need to do, my design is done, my ends are clean, fit with the design I want. They all have the right amount of twist. It's all coming down to a point. So I'm going to start using these graphite hemispheres, marble molds, or marble paddle. And I'm going to shape this into a sphere. And I can't do it all at once without ruining my design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to persuade it gently in several stages to become more spherical. Glass, when it's hot and becoming a liquid, it wants to pull into a sphere, a droplet. The things that are preventing it from doing that is gravity and uneven heat. So I'm keeping the heat even, and I'm rotating it to prevent gravity from taking effect in any one place. You can see it wants to fall. But it's like on its own, it's pulling into a more marble shape. I'm going to use a larger hemisphere than the marble itself and give it a little persuasion to become more spherical. And we got it quite a bit more spherical. Let's do that one more time. Once it's pretty spherical on this free end, I'm going to smooth the surface by running it through a cherry wood paddle. The graphite is nice for getting your shape close, but the graphite pulls a lot of heat out of the surface of the marble very quickly. That translates into the surface getting chilled, well, the glass underneath is still moving and molten. And so as that surface gets chilled and freezes, and the molten surface underneath is pushed along, it ripples the surface. Part of the surface is freezing, pushing, freezing, pushing, like waves. And I'll show you the kind of an in-between size marble. It's nice to have a a hemisphere that's just a bit bigger than the marble you're working on, and then one that's smaller so you can just use the rim. So you can see up above me there's light bulbs, and the reflection of those light bulbs is wiggling as I turn this marble, and that's because of the ripples in the surface. So now I'm going to use heat to let the surface tension pull the surface relatively smooth. Then I'm going to use a cherry wood marble paddle, which doesn't pull heat from the marble. It's only touching on this very smallest area. It's just using the rim of a hole. So almost no surface of the marble would-be sphere is touching that mold at any given time. And the area that is touching it is on some very fine-grained graphite, which is soaked in water, so that only steam is actually in contact with the marble. So here's the marble panel, and I'm going to spin the marble while changing the axis of the rotation. Made it smooth. So those boards, cherry wood boards, are boards that I traded a guy like 25 years ago. He had milled them 25 years ago, building some stuff with his dad. And I've had these boards soaking in water for 25 years. So whenever I need a new paddle, I just pull out a Flossner bit and my drill press and drill some holes in the new cut a paddle shape, and right back in the water it goes. So it's very stable wood. Alright, so the marble's a bit too hot, because as I was talking I was putting it in the flame. I over exuberantly heated it, so I'm going to put it back in the cherry wood mills one more time. Then, let's look at it. It's going to be very, very sparkly. So now, this side of the marble is done. Let's attach a tiny glass handle to it. And I want that attachment point to be clean. So I melted the tip of this rod. I'm pulling off any impurities in that glass. I'm sharpening it to a pencil point on my torch face. Can you see that? There it is. I'm going to heat the marble up to a certain temperature, a secret certain temperature, and the rod to another secret certain temperature, and I'm going to have them just touch. And that was a little bit off center. It'll be alright. Now I have an attachment point that is where it's not, they haven't quite merged together, but they should hold on to each other for a while. Now I'm just cleaning up where that last steel puntee was attached. I could talk about cleaning up those last attachment points forever. No, for a while. So I just wanted to, combination of pushing and letting that pull in with itself so that we retain our nice point. And now this free end of the marble, not super spherical, so I'm going to run it through the graphite molds, get a little bit improved as far as sphericalness. Then I'm going to have a run through the cherry wood paddles, and it should be very smooth and spherical after that. And then we'll be able to detach it. Kind of bobbled that one. I'm going to do it one more time. I was trying to show you, and it was out of my dexterity zone for that kind of spin. which is nice. It's good to get out of your normal things, and also not burn the crap out of yourself. That's also nice. So, using the rim and changing the axis of rotation as I spin it gave us a nice spherical shape. Be a very nice, soft, frit looking design. There were some names for these kinds of marbles when they were imported. The German glassblowing companies had certain names for them, and then those names were completely ignored by the American company that imported them, and then the American company that imported them, their names were completely ignored by the kids who then played with the marbles and called them whatever they wanted, which is the way it should be. Alright, get my cherry wood paddle, and so you can see this thing is continuing to spin even after I let it go. I'm guiding it, but when it continues to spin like that, you know you've got a nice sphericalness going. Alright, so this marble is ready to go into the annealing oven. What I'm going to do is use my jacks and chill that attachment point, which is a frail attachment point. I'm going to do it in a fireproof tile, like a ceramic fiber tile. Once that taps off, I'm going to pick up my torch and polish that last little attachment nub, and I'll bring it over here. So I'm using the scissors to just sort of pantomime cut that rod off. I'm tapping it. Comes loose. Going to knock and dust loose the torch. There. I don't want any of that debris coming loose and getting onto my surface of my marble. I'm strongly heating that area, and then I'm backing off to let it calm down. I strongly heat it again, and I can see the surface is really melting and pulling in, so I'll back off again. Give it one more chance to pull perfect. Looks great. I'm going to get a little spring tweezer that I've made specifically for picking up marbles. Heat these up until they're orange, evenly orange, and then let them go chill back to black. And that's the right temperature, 900 degrees, 1000 degrees. I can pick up this marble off of the flame-proof tile, and there it is. Good to go. Into the don't burn myself. And I'm going to put that in the annealing oven. I'll be right back. So, I've mentioned the annealing oven, and what that is when you have twisted the glass all around and mixed different colors together, you've put strains on all of the atomic bonds in the structure of the glass, which wants to be a tetragonal silicon oxide molecular structure. So if those bond angles are bent, a lot of them are bent, and then you allow that glass to solidify with strain upon those bond angles, that can cause the glass to fracture. So what we're doing in the annealing oven is we're holding that glass at just the temperature where the glass is solid, but the molecules have a lot of energy, and those bond angles can relax and straighten out to their natural position. Then you drop the temperature down and solidify the glass, crystallizing it in its preferred form, and it's very stable. And it will be resistant to cracking. And a sphere, of course, is a very strong geometric shape, and glass is very inert. So marbles are the best art medium ever created in the universe. heard it here first. And, of course, it's 100% correct. I guess I can see comments this time. I didn't see any questions go by, but it's nice to be able to see the comments again. I'm not sure how my settings are different now than they were before. But I will see you guys next week at the demo, and I'll try to post this marble tomorrow, and I forgot to post last week, so I'll post last week's as well, the dichroic swirl. All right, have a good night, and we'll see you next time.